Hello, it's Father Norm coming to you again. I've been doing this on a weekly basis, in part in the midst of all that's going on these days, to be able to talk about our faith, our spirituality, that can really be a source of inner peace and security in the midst of everything happening. I want to ask you a question that's probably unusual. I've asked it even at Mass among the people, and they wonder, where am I going with this? When I took up homiletics about preaching, they said, often start your homily by something that gets their attention so they listen to you. Well, this one has always got the attention of the folks when I go in the midst of the congregation and ask it. Here it is. I ask, okay, and I ask you right now, how many people here consider yourself a great lover? Whoa. A lot of people, when they hear that, you can hear there's some nervous laughter. And I often say, now, what are you thinking about? But you don't have to tell me. And I said, we get an image of great lover that's maybe a Hollywood R-rated version when we think about that expression. In fact, sometimes when I've talked to married couples, I'll say, even for people who've been married many years and very happily, they don't think of themselves as great lovers. The reality is they are, and how they give of themselves for many, many years to one another, to their children, and to the community. So as I ask that question here, again, week two, if you had to grade yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, how great a lover are you in terms of being unselfishly offering yourself to others on a daily basis and being there for them? Of course, when people do start to laugh when I first ask, I'll say this. Well, especially among Christians, but people of other faith too. Who is someone you consider to be a great lover? And right away, people start to mention Jesus Christ. And obviously, coming out of the Christian perspective, and that he's the center of it all. And I'll often ask, well, what's that aspect of love that you see is so great in him? And people undoubtedly will mention his willingness to go to the cross out of love, even from the cross to forgive those who are putting him there. Great love and how true that is. And then I'll ask, well, okay, he showed great love at the cross, and we need to remember that, and that's a central aspect of our faith. But did he show great love in other ways? And especially in his adult public ministry. And people will mention, well, sure, that he was attentive to other people. He noticed them. Here's a great example. We all know the story of Zacchaeus, the tax collector. Zacchaeus was certainly not liked at all as a tax collector, in part because he was taking people's money, and in part because he represented the Roman government that the people hated in getting that tax. And there he was, as Jesus went to his town. He was up in a tree because he was short and he wanted to be able to see this Jesus. He must have heard something about him. And he must have thought, this Jesus, you keep hearing what a loving person he is, and maybe he'll be able to show kindness to me. Maybe I'll see his love in action and benefit from it. But even if I don't, I want to see him. I just want to notice him as he goes by. And so Jesus started to go by. Zacchaeus noticed Jesus, but especially Jesus noticed Zacchaeus, even though he was up a tree. Jesus saw him, reached out to him, noticed him, paid attention to him. And basically, he said, Zacchaeus, come down from that tree. I want to go to your home today and share a meal with you. Sharing a meal in the Jewish faith meant that there was a deep communion with one another. Can you imagine how Zacchaeus felt? This great man noticed him, didn't put him down, didn't reject him, didn't ignore him, but said, hey, I want to spend some time with you. Spending time, isn't that a great aspect of loving? And of course he did, and we know that touched and changed Zacchaeus. Often when we look at how people are transformed, our world today can get too caught up in fear. How do we change people because we make them afraid? But for Jesus, He knew that which touches people the most is love, is attentive love. And so Zacchaeus, because of that, said, "Hey, I frauded people. I ripped people off." He would have used that language, but he basically said that. And he said, "But now I will give so much of my wealth to others. I'll give it back to the people," because touched by Jesus' love helped him to be more loving, recognizing the generosity that Jesus had in going with him and spending time helped him to want to be generous for the rest of his life. Wow. Great love can touch other lives and convert them. In fact, love is often what does it the most. As we look at that, we look at aspects of love, we certainly can see what it means to be present to people. Even when Jesus was spoken of as Emmanuel, when he was coming to birth, Emmanuel means God with us. So that we see it starts with God. God is not someone just a distant figure, only noticing us when we do wrong and scolding us. God, through Jesus, is as near to us as anyone could be. And again, we need to stay mindful of that. And was attentive to us right where we are in the circumstances we are through Jesus. And so, attentive love. Let's look at that. I remember one couple talking to me when we were sequestered, when you had to stay home in the early days of this pandemic and couldn't go out hardly at all. And I remember them telling me that at the time they thought, oh, this is going to be horrible. Part of the reason is they had three kids, all approaching teenage years, and they thought, oh, this is going to be hard. They're going to be here. They're going to be complaining. It's going to be a negative atmosphere, bracing themselves for the worst. But what happened is they started to take a change in attitude. I mean, they wanted the change in attitude for their kids, but for some reason, they realized it needed to start with them. And so they tried to reach out, be more attentive to their children, and to show them how much they cared, and to find things that they could do together. And the kids actually warmed up to it. And in the beginning, they complained. But this couple talked about how they had board games, how they watched different movies. In fact, I think told many of you there's a something called Formed that's like Netflix for Catholics, and it's got all kinds of great videos and movies about saints, about religious matters. They would watch those once a week, have a movie night, and then talk about it. And they would have special night where they'd have banana floats, or not banana floats, I guess, whatever those banana splits. I remember having those as a kid. Root beer floats. Yeah, there we go. But again, looking for ways to enjoy being in one another's company, to be attentive to one another. And they were. Which also reminds me, I remember I was talking at a church one time about love, and a fella, a teenager, probably 17, 18, came up to me afterward, and he made a statement that struck me, and I thought, well, what did he mean by it? He said to me right away, he said, "I need to tell you something, Father. I wish my dad would yell at me." I thought, whoa, what teenager would have that as a request? And I said, well, why do you want him to yell at you? Because I thought, gee, what this kid is he being negative about himself and wants to be put down? No. Here's what he shared with me. He said, and this is before the pandemic. He said, my dad is always on the go. He has a job that just takes lots of hours at work, and then when he's home, he's working hard there too. And I know he says he's doing it for us. He makes good money, and he wants us to have a good family with that kind of money. And he said, but you know what? My dad, when he's leaving or going out, he'll sometimes say he knows that maybe I'm going to a movie or something. And as he's leaving, he'll go, hey, here's $5 for the movie and some popcorn or something. But he says it quickly on the go. And I'm sure for him, it's a gesture of, hey, I care about you. And he tends to think about it in money. And so there he is. Hey, he's being a good dad because he's giving me a few bucks to go out. But he said, I hardly ever, in fact, he said never, and recently have a chance to really sit down and talk, and him to listen to me and respond. He's always, again, in a hurry. I feel that he cares more about that work and making money than me, even though he says he's doing that work in order to benefit me and the whole family. And I remember asking him, I said, well, have you ever said anything to him about that? Have you ever told him how you felt? Well, no. You know, what teenager is going to do that? It feels too vulnerable. Hey, Dad, I wish you'd pay more attention, or you mean much to me. And I know a lot of teenagers because I've heard teenage confessions as a priest. And I'm not giving away secrets, but many teenagers would say, gee, I know I want to be closer to my parents. I don't treat them so well. They probably think I don't care about them, but the reality is I value them and what they say and their attention. And so even with this fellow, I said, maybe you can say something. And maybe your dad doesn't even realize it. He thinks, hey, yeah, you're a teenager and the parents aren't that important. So he said he would. Now, it was a parish in Cleveland. I never saw him again, but I hope he did that. And it is a reminder, parents and kids, we all need each other's attentive love. And hopefully, we don't have to be sequestered at home with nothing else to do to spend time with each other and to recognize what a gift we are to each other. One other example I want to use of attentive love comes from my own life. A lot of you know my mother died in 1998, and I've already said she was a single parent, raised me as an only child. And a year before that, she was dealing with cancer over a year before the cancer took her. But obviously and ultimately, it wasn't the cancer that took her. Cancer took her from this life, but our God brought her to everlasting life. Cancer did not have the final say, but God's goodness and love and promise of life forever had the final say. But that last year was obviously difficult. She had always been a very lively person, and she was going downhill. And I can remember when I took her to the doctor. And as we went to the doctor, I sat in the waiting room, and she was finding out more about the cancer. When she came out, I could see that she was crestfallen. There was sadness in her, and she said, "Oh, the cancer recurred, and more is happening with it." Right away, as soon as she said that, what I did, I went into my talk. Maybe a lot of us do. Oh, mom, you conquered it many years ago. You'll conquer it again. It'll be fine. You don't have to worry. It'll be good. Hey, this is a great doctor. He'll make it happen. And just on, like being her cheerleader for the moment. And then I looked at her and I recognized, right at that moment, she didn't need my cheerleading. She would need ongoing encouragement, but what she just heard. And finally, this God, his spirit got into me and helped me to see what I need to do in that moment in order to be great at loving my mom, who I did love so deeply. So what I did, I quit talking. I went up to her. Obviously, this wasn't in the pandemic. And I just gave her a big hug and held her and said, Mom, this is so difficult to hear, isn't it? This is hard. And she began to tear up, and so did I. That was one of the deepest bonding moments. And it also was an awareness for me of, uh, of what's most appropriate to do in the moment. She needed attentive love. She needed to be responded to through the hurt and fear she was going through, not with a lot of words, but simply with a presence. And that's maybe often what we're called to do for and with each other. Um, so I'm going to end this, but again, attentive love. How would you score yourself on a scale of 1 to 10? And whatever it is, how can you and I in daily life, maybe in just everyday ordinary circumstances, be a little more attentive of others to let them know we notice them and we're there for them, whether it means to laugh with them, to cry with them, or simply to listen to them share what's ever in their heart. Thanks for being attentive to this, and I appreciate all of you. God bless you, and may we go forth and become even more great lovers.